Welcome back to the Hishaku Hideout, a weekly podcast where we talk about the latest chapter and everything Kagurabachi. I'm here with Dice.
It's good to be back.
And today we're getting into chapter 83. First, I'd like to just start off and say I was a bit worried when we found out Chihiro got the information of the 200,000 lives lost during the war because of the Masumi. You know, about a month or two ago, I kind of spoke on the concerns of getting that off panel, and we're actually getting that information or seeing that conversation now. And my worries were put to rest. I think Hokazono, he cooked, and, it was handled really well. How do you feel about this chapter? And now that we finally get that conversation from Shiba and Chihiro?
Yeah, dude, 100%. I mean, I'd say you and me both, right? We both had our kind of issues in seeing that Chihiro had found out off screen about what essentially was the biggest lore drop of the story that far, right? And so at the moment, it was a bit disappointing. And so you and me, we had to kind of settle for, let Hokazono cook, right? Which we've just been repeating for most of this arc. And yeah, man, it's paid off because I agree. I think seeing that conversation, this chapter and its implications, everything makes sense, right? And so I'm glad that we weren't really too hard on Hokazono. We, like I said, we've essentially let him cook, and seeing kind of everything ultimately start falling into place is, I think, what we start getting in this chapter as we find out the true purpose of Enten.
I don't think we've ever been harsh on Hokazono. I think we've been honest about things. And, we've been right, we've been wrong. And I don't think it's I don't think there should always be a space for you to be able to criticize the things that you love. Because if you can't be honest about the flaws, then, it's a bit of a toxic relationship to that, IP or that series. And I don't want that to be like that for us, So I think even when we were going back and had our issues with it getting off screened at that point, we did bring up the fact that, we're definitely going to go back to that. We have to.
Yeah.
Hokazono, I think, like he said, he has a good grasp of the medium and the demographic. He knows how to weave in these lore drops, these reveals, but he does it within a chapter that is also very engaging and exciting. So it can be a bit grating to always hear let Hokazono cook, because we know that, I have faith in the man. This is 83 chapters and he hasn't let us down,
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think a reason that we find ourselves kind of holding on to that more now than perhaps earlier in the story is because we're diving so deep into lore stuff, timeline stuff, and there's a lot of back and forth, and it's hard, or it can be easy to get caught up in what's happening in the moment and get impatient, right? But as we kind of jump back and forth and reveals kind of interweave with what's happening present day, and like I said, everything just starts to click and you're able to see the bigger picture and understand. And it's something that I've said a couple of times now, Hokazono doesn't really do things by accident, right? In terms of things of gravity, things of importance, everything is meticulously done in terms of how characters are developed, when reveals take place, what we know, what we don't know, compared to the characters in the story. And so I think this chapter is evidence of that, right?
Yeah, facts. And one thing I want to mention is, a lot of the stuff is planned, and he's outlined his story. Because if you go back into the beginning of the series, the Sojo arc, he purposefully made sure some words were in bold. They stuck out. He's always had an idea of what he wanted to accomplish, and these important trigger words or things that they feel fulfilling once we get to the point of that's the connection. You go back and read and you see one word is in bold, and then 30 chapters later it's kind of a callback to that, or it plays onto that word, whatever it may be. he's done a great job of just constructing the story. And it's not perfect, but considering the man like is 24 and he's created this it's like a movement, so shout out Hokazono.
Yeah, no, and we know, just to say this real quick, we know there was break week last week because he was sick. So what a way to come back with this chapter, right? So it's good to see he's well, right, by the looks of it, or at least in terms of the chapter. But what are your thoughts kind of on what we're seeing here between Chihiro and Samura? Like I said, there's a lot of there's more lore reveal in regards to Enten, especially, and we see that Chihiro's trying to convince Samura, like, yo, there's another way. There's another way.
The fact of him even being like, he was even able to at least get Samura to ask him a question finally. He said, show me? What on earth do you want to show me? Like, he's at least reached him to, like,
listen.
He broke through the door at least. He's like, before he's like, the door is closed, I'm shutting myself off. There's nothing you can say. But, Chihiro's standing up against him, and, like, Chihiro isn't the type of like fighter that is overconfident. Like, we see the fact of him mention how strong Samura is in that first clash, that if he would have tried to hold his ground, his arm would have blew off because of the impact.
Crazy, right?
Like, so he's very aware of, like, his shortcomings compared to his opponent. That doesn't necessarily mean he will lose, because he has, like, these intangible things that no other fighter has. And, like, the knowledge of the enchanted swords, like, is like getting paid in full with every fight. It's like him knowing how the enchanted blades work gives him an edge. It kind of helps bridge the gap a bit. Now, of course, Samura is a powerhouse, but I think it's really interesting how Chihiro is starting to, like, just innately, like, he's like, it's like innate now, like his like him synchronizing with Enten. It says, like, the sword everything feels lighter, it's more natural. So it's not gonna be as taxing, which that's the thing. It's like, his body was getting, the entire story, his body's been getting, like, ravaged and beat up.
Yeah.
But now, he is getting to a point where the sword is starting to feel like a part of him, which is a major thing that I think will, not necessarily get overlooked, but I think it's like, it kind of gets overshadowed by, like, the things in the later part of the chapter, excuse me. But yeah, Chihiro is ever so impressive. I mean, but I can't lie, Samura doing his fake out switch, like, he only swapped Tobimune and then he swapped it back in his hand after that was cold.
Too cold. No, too cold, man. One thing that I do like is, I said that things are kind of like falling in place for us as readers in terms of digesting the wider story. What I love as well is that things are also falling into place for Chihiro in terms of owning, like you said, his let's say relationship with Enten, right? Because for the last 24 hours, we know that he's owned the EI White Purity style, right? And that was essentially, I don't want to say the key, but it was what it was emphasized for him to be able to reach the next level as a swordsman, right? And essentially he's been able to do that, right? Obviously we know that he will keep growing, but we know that he was able to develop the EI White Purity style, and now we're seeing the payoff through him feeling more connected to Enten, as well as knowing the truth of the malediction, right? So once again, I can't help but feel that everything is falling into place for Chihiro as well to really grow, and, like, that is opening the door for Samura, I feel like, to give him the chance, because we know that Chihiro, like, we know that this fight is about Chihiro wanting to reach Samura, right? And Chihiro sees a lot of himself in Samura. He's looked up to him, right? And I think what we're seeing in this fight, and why we see a bit of hesitation from Samura's fight, or like even the slightest inch to give Chihiro like the chance, is because we know that Samura doesn't want to do what he's doing. Like, he doesn't want to. And so I think that deep inside, he wants to be proven wrong. Like, he wants Chihiro to really prove to him, like, dude, there is this other way. It's not just like, it's not a fantasy, right? It's not a far-fetched dream. And so Samura's just been so stuck in his ways and hit this path that he's gone down on for the past 3 years, that to sway him, it's gonna be really fucking hard. But like I just said, Chihiro, everything has fallen in place for him to do just that. And that's like one of the reasons why I'm really digging this chapter after everything that has gone down during this arc, man. And we haven't gone to Enten yet, so.
And if I was Chihiro, I would tell him, like, we don't even see, because this is how I think about it, right? The fact the sword master is like in jail, like they don't know what's going on at Kaminabi headquarters. Mm-hmm. Neither of them. But if I was Chihiro, with like the predetermined knowledge of, you know, Hakuri could still be okay. You know, like he doesn't know how Hakuri's doing, but he at least knows that he was stable. They, you know, it's just, you know, he couldn't really see him before he left. But I was like, you've seen what Hakuri can do. Tobimune is in your hands because of Hakuri. We just need to get Hakuri to, you know, I mean, obviously, like with the Magatsumi in the Kaminabi's possession, Hakuri only needs to make Hakuri only needs to like be in touch with it one time to register it, and then he could tell him, like, we could break the sword away. You know, the sword, like, no one needs to wield the Magatsumi. Like, I would even try and like finesse like that to him. Like, not saying that's what will work or what it is, but at least like with the knowledge both of them have, like, I feel like that would have been a viable like avenue for him to be like, you know, we have Hakuri. He just needs to come in contact with the Magatsumi one time, and then he can teleport it to me whenever, or, you know, we could both go in the storehouse and I can break it there. And then you know, if it doesn't break, then we'll have it safe in the storehouse till I can break it. You know, like that would be like the ultimate plan, because no one could get it. That's in that point. But I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't think that would work on Samura. But you know, that's the one thing I was thinking about. I was like, bro, you have Hakuri. That's like the ultimate like trump card for like this kind of situation.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think the whole thing with Samura is that, well, I mean, I think it's pretty clear, right? Like, he doesn't believe it. Like, he doesn't believe that the Shinichi can be destroyed. And so, yeah, you know, regarding Hakuri's importance as well, Yura is well aware. So, like, to what you just said, like, I don't think, not only would it be hard to convince Samura, but Yura, you know, would not let that happen. You know, like he's well aware of Hakuri's importance. We saw them going at Hakuri through the Pine Sorcery a couple of chapters back as well. So, yeah.
And they even talk about when Samura goes to the Hishaku's like little hideout thing that they were in that room.
Hey, shout out.
They even bring up the fact of like him exhausting Hakuri. Like he mentions, you know, we've exhausted Hakuri Sazanami.
Exactly.
That was a huge thing. So, you know, to your point that you know, you're right about that. Like, Yura is the planner, and that's who I'm excited to see, like what his how he's gonna get around all this. You know, when we get into the theory portion at the end, I do have a theory on how this fight that we're watching unfold in front of us is gonna go.
Ooh.
And so we'll get there. But one thing I wanted to say about the actual fight itself, that panel where when he slashes that feather and then Samura teleports behind him, like the next panel after that with them teleporting all over the place is crazy. It's like insane choreography. Like, Chihiro's just like, shit, like what am I supposed to do against this?
if it isn't yet, I can at least say it's probably the best fight choreography we've seen. And I can't put, like, I feel pretty confident putting some stock into this being the best fight yet. Because what we just see and the way it's so like easy to pick up on what's going on in regards to how Samura is using Crow and how Chihiro is able to keep up with Nishiki is just flawless. Like, I literally have nothing negative to say in regards to the paneling and how that fight comes across through the page, you know, like it is perfect, bro. And I couldn't help but like be hype, you know, like we see just Samura going at Chihiro from all angles. We see Chihiro like struggling to keep up, but like managing to do so. And like, oh, just, you know, once again, the Rokuhira eyes coming in clutch because he's able to pick up the trace of the spirit energy through Crow. And even then, Samura is still able to pick up on that and counter that. It's like, it reminds me a bit of the fight with Kiora, where there was a lot of that kind of like chess play where like, oh, I can foresee your move, but can I counter you foreseeing that I foresee your move? You know, like it's that sort of like, exactly. Yes, exactly. That sort of stuff. And it's peak, man. Like, I'm just blown away, bro. And once again, we still haven't gotten to Enten yet.
Yeah, I mean, and definitely like the choreography is something to highlight because it's fun. You know, this fight, you know, I never really thought about what's the best fight in Kagurabachi because honestly, a lot of the fights are kind of quick. You know, they happen pretty fast. Like, excuse me, Sojo and Chihiro's fight. I mean, like their first interaction, like that was like the fight. And at the end, they're both like weak, you know, they're both damaged. A lot of the fights that Chihiro gets into, he's already damaged, like the big fights.
Yeah.
You know, that's even now, I mean, he's still pretty, like, he's not 100% here, whereas Samura is 100%, or damn near close to 100%.
Yeah.
It's like, Chihiro is pretty, I mean, think about it, he also stayed up all night, too. He's doing this with, like, no rest. You know, he's been training. He's had to fight all those goons, Hirohiko, and it's something to be said that he's doing this well against Samura. In my eyes, like the second strongest will forever be the second strongest in Kagurabachi. I don't think anyone's going to surpass him like overall. But this fight has everything. It has like a change of scenery. You know, they go from the hotel, now they're like fighting here. It has like the engagement of not just the action scenes, but like the dialogue. Hokazono knows when to use like Chihiro's thoughts or like a quick short panel of, you know, Chihiro saying only his sword. Like those little small like transition panels is done really well. It's all flawless. And I mean, it all leads up to like the big thing of after they clash that time and Samura kicks him away. As Chihiro sinks underwater, which I think is one of the coldest panels that we see him underwater with him and his father's workshop behind him. You know, we get more of the information from Shiba, and I'll let you kind of talk on that.
Yeah, just to talk about the panel a little bit. I hadn't really caught on to this until now, but it's also fitting, right? Considering Enten's abilities revolve around goldfish, and we've seen a lot of like the water drops being a part of like Enten's visual flair, right? And like now Chihiro's like being submerged quite literally in his memories, and we see like bubbles as well. Like I just thought it was a bit fitting considering Enten's abilities. But yeah, man, speaking of Enten, you know, we've talked a lot about on this pod like Kunishige, his guilt. You know, you've pretty much been on the money saying that Chihiro was Kunishige's greatest creation, and essentially that's what we all get confirmed in a nice little package in this chapter, right? Like, not only was Chihiro Kunishige's greatest creation because he was his son, but he was literally the guiding light for him and actually forged Enten with him, right? And we know that the true purpose of Enten, like you accurately predicted a while back, is to protect, right? And to counter not just the other swords, but mainly the Shinichi. And on top of that, we find out that Cloud Gouger was broken because of this, right? So even though Cloud Gouger broke in the hands of Chihiro when he was wielding it, what essentially led to that was the clash with Enten. And once again, Enten's true purpose.
The fact that he even like cracked it in half was like, you know, that's like a feat in and of itself. Even if like there's some discrepancy of like why it broke, if it's because of, you know, I think that's Hokazono just trying to like keep it. What if it was just because Sojo was inexperienced with swords, you know, like just trying to like keep it like, you know, like a what if about it. Maybe it's not the case. Maybe it's something different. But I think it's safe to say that like Sojo was a capable enough like opponent and combatant to where he was, you know, kind of like Chihiro, just kind of doing it instinctually, you know, sure. But I mean, that dude, he was a beast, you know. I think that it's the fact of like, they say they couldn't even put a dent into Magatsumi. But like Chihiro was able to at least, you know, and that was a Magatsumi that wasn't being controlled by anybody, you know. But I mean, the Magatsumi is a bit different. But still, like Chihiro just, you know, broke the blade in half. And, you know, that in and of itself, like Shiba says, you know, that's like a shout out to you. You know, that isn't to like his failure, it's your success.
Yeah, no, because he says like, sure, like Sojo wasn't a good swordsman, but he was no slouch, you know, like, and we know from like conversations, like we've seen tidbits where like Sojo did have like a respect for swordsmanship. Like we know now that he wasn't cream of the crop, but we've had you know, like Kaguri said that one line, like, oh, I have to, like he spoke about how Sojo had talked to him about like becoming one with the sword when he's like carrying his enchanted blade around, right? Even though he still hasn't been contracted with it. So we know that Sojo has some, you know,
True.
Sojo has some degree of swordsmanship. Like we've seen that.
That's a good call.
Yeah, no. So like I you know, this is like you said, it's Shiba saying it was you, bro. It was you and Enten. And you know, that's what he's trying to convince Samura. Can Samura believe it though?
Kaguri is a swordsman, tried and true. That's his thing. You know, that's what he cares about. That's I don't remember him ever like specifically like bad mouthing Sojo. It seemed like he only spoke highly of Sojo, or at least in the sense of wielding, because remember, Sojo wasn't a Hishaku member either. But Kaguri is at least like taking his words like to heart. You know, it's not that he was like, oh, that's just like a you know, a bum with a sword. You know, like he's just getting saved. He's, you know, genuinely took his words to heart, which I think like even just shows that at least there's some faith in his ability. Another thing I want to mention is Shiba brings up that this is the only time in Rakuhiro's career as a master swordsmith that he created a sword with someone. We do know that the Magatsumi's the sword master was said to be like Kunishige's right hand man. We now get confirmation that, because my original theory was that he was kind of like Chihiro in a sense, where he learned about like the swords, like helping Kunishige, and you know, maybe that's why he chose him to do the Magatsumi, because he had the information. But now we get confirmation that no, Kunishige made all the original 6 blades by himself. So the sword master has some other kind of connection to Kunishige to be considered his right hand man. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. But I do love that like Chihiro is, you know, basically being told by Shiba, like, bro, like your dad, like you were the light for Kunishige. The swords, like they were like what he's known for. That's his legacy. But the truth is, like that was also the thing that plunged him into this abyss of darkness. That, you know, the only thing that saved him was you. And Chihiro being this like dark and edgy character, I think it's moments like this that will help soften him up towards like the end, you know, because it's not gonna come overnight of him softening up. Because I mean, he's also kind of a softie too. Like we know who Chihiro is. He's the
Yeah.
same guy that took Char to all these places to eat and have dessert. He
Yeah.
faces everyone's challenge like head on, and he respectfully, like he appreciates someone who's giving their all to something, because that's what he's doing. So he wants to honor that. Like he thinks of others, and it's just like, and the creation of Enten and Chihiro's upbringing kind of like coincide with like the purpose of each other, because I don't think Kunishige doesn't. It's not like we don't get confirmation that like Kunishige wanted Chihiro to wield Enten or anything like that. You know what I mean? It's just a sword that he created with his son. We don't know what Kunishige's plan was if he didn't die. It'd be interesting to see if we get that information, or if it'll just be kind of left in the dark.
No, well, I'm glad you do bring that up, because that is kind of what I wanted to get into right now, because we know that Chihiro was his guiding light, and like in forging this blade, it's like he was able to, because after being in the darkness for so long, we know that he found purpose in creating this blade with his son, and this blade being different from these other blades, and with the intent to break the Shinichi and essentially clean up his previous mistake, let's put it like that, right? But you make a very good point, and like I said, is what I wanted to get into. We have no indication yet that he always meant for his son to bear the sword, and it is interesting to think about, because to me, Kunishige, like what we know about him, he doesn't necessarily strike me as the guy that would want his son to carry his burden, right? So do we think that Kunishige was even looking that far ahead in terms of like who was going to wield this blade? I personally think he must have, right? Like there's just no way he's forging that blade without even crossing his mind who's going to be the one to wield it. And if I'll just go ahead and say what I think. To me, I think it was probably something where like he wouldn't want his son to carry that burden, but he can't help but feel that he's the one that's like that can do it. He's the only one that understands the enchanted blades. He's the only one that's been literally raised by the creator, who's learned from his mistakes. So it's kind of like I can imagine Kunishige being torn from like not wanting to pass this curse to his son, but at the time thinking that his son might be the only one that can carry this and truly correct his mistake. And you and me have talked about like whether Kunishige knew or anticipated his death, right? That's a whole nother conversation, but yeah, it's interesting.
I want to bring up real quick that,
go ahead.
Thinking about it now, like the truth is, I guess, the truth is, I think, because it's also like me and you are getting into like this nebulous thought of like what would have been the purpose if he didn't die. I guess the fact remains, if Kunishige never died, maybe he just would have wielded Enten and tried to break the swords himself. Maybe that was his plan.
Well, yeah,
because he had all the swords there. If he didn't die, like they wouldn't be out in the open. But I mean, he might have known that. But now, if he did know that the ambush was coming, then maybe he did make Enten like with using his eyes. Like he says with Uruha and his flashback, he remembers Kunishige saying, you are right for this sword, or however he phrased it, basically tell him like this sword suits you, or that's what it was. And that maybe that 18th birthday, maybe that like on Chihiro's 18th birthday, he would have told him like, now you're old enough to know everything, and
fair.
If you're willing to accept like my mistakes and wield this sword to right the wrongs that I feel like I've done, like this sword suits you. Like that would be a cool scene.
Oh yeah, I see exactly what you're getting at. Yeah, no, I mean, it also a lot rests on what more we get regarding Yura and the possible connection between him and Kunishige, whether they actually knew each other, whether Kunishige had a reason to fear that this day might come. Like that's still stuff we don't know yet, and that very well could easily change what we're discussing right now. One thing that you just brought up the fact that Kunishige handed Uruha the blade and told them, you're the right one, right, to wield Kimiyuri. We also find out this chapter, and maybe I'm reading a bit too much into it, though I don't think I am, but we find out this chapter that the blades, Kunishige only crafted purpose into them. It seems like the power pretty much, I don't want to say like just like it was random, but it seems to like depend on what he was forging, like the properties of the Datenseki itself. He had nothing to do with the powers of the enchanted blades with themselves. So to me, that was just something interesting to kind of keep in the back of our head, because like I just said, he only crafted them with intent. The powers kind of are within, I would assume, the properties of the blades themselves, of the Datenseki. And so it's obviously, the Rokuhira eyes, he's able to look into that and assign the swords accordingly. But I just wanted to bring that up because it is a bit of lore, a bit of information that contextualizes things a bit more. And once again, it only emphasizes like what would prompt him to give the Magatsumi to the fucking Master Swordsman.
Yeah, that's what we need to see. But one thing I do like that we find out in this chapter is, they were being, invaded by the Shikoku, natives.
Yeah.
It says like without those blades, we would have lost. We would have been wiped out. So like he says, you need to see the world with your own eyes and come up with your answer for like justice or, what's right. And Kunishige is like, it's unfortunate like that he has the ability to create these swords, and that was justice. That had to be the answer to save the lives of everyone in Japan. That doesn't mean that even though it was the only answer, the only correct answer, that doesn't mean it's it's easy to live with. Like it had to be done. He did it. He saved. He is a hero. Like Kunishige is a hero. Like that has like this chapter has like confirmed it to me that there's no more like second guessing if maybe he was on some weird like stuff, or like, unless and maybe there's like, we kind of talked about it and I don't want to get too deep into the theory or nothing, but unless there was like a instigate, like someone from Japan kind of instigated Shikoku into invading, and then it could get a little murky. But as of now, all the information we have is just Kunishige's answer was creating these blades, and he struggled with it after. Chihiro's answer is to right the wrongs and basically to wipe out his father's legacy. But that's more important to him. Like his memories with his father are more important to him than his father's legacy is to him.
Yeah. No, I mean, everybody has an opinion. That's something that we've seen, throughout the whole Yori and Samura stuff. Everybody has an opinion on the Seitei War and who the real bad guys were. So, to your credit, like Chihiro has to let go of that quote unquote legacy and look at the world through his own eyes and take things for what they are, not, not this kind of storied version. At the end of the day, is like, it is what it is, right? And you take the good with the bad. It isn't just black or white, and he has to live with that, right? It's up to him to be able to stand on what he believes and fulfill his mission, because it's not meant to be easy. Like you said, it could get even more murky than it already has. Like I cannot emphasize enough, like, we do not know anything about Yura as well as the Master Swordsman, and like they're just two characters that are too important, right, for their stories not to influence the way we look at things, right? I mean, I could be wrong, and like their stories could just be completely irrelevant to what's going on now. I just seriously doubt it, right? But yeah, I do agree. I agree. Kunishige, like there is no doubt about it. Obviously, in times of war, like things are never really clear cut. So obviously a hero to some, a villain to others. But like I said, that doesn't matter. Ultimately, Kunishige did what he had to do to save lives. And it just so happens that on the other side of the fence, more people ended up dying than what he intended. Right? So.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, like a lot of that stuff is just up in the air, you know, right now, you know, because it's just, that's why I said it's hard to like, especially with like the subject matter and the like, you know, the way the story is structured, it's made to like where you second guess the Kamunabi, you know, and we know there's a traitor within the Kamunabi, but aside from that traitor, like the Kamunabi just may be this like, you know, sketchy government, like normal sketchy like government official that every series like usually has, you know, where it's like the asshole cop or, you know, but like he's just an asshole, you know, it's not that he does anything technically like bad. But so we'll see how the story plays out. Lastly, the only thing to talk about is fucking Chihiro just teleporting his sword or swapping places with that fish to bring his sword back to him. Like, because everything leading up to that, we kind of touched on already. I just want to say, one, that is a fire panel. That's one of my favorite Chihiro panels. And just with like the words, with the Enten, I'll destroy the Shinichi. I just love, because it's such a heavy, like that's a panel that we're going to go back to, you know, like 100 chapters from now. And we're going to be like, damn, like, you know, like that boy said it then. And like now he's faced with someone with the Shinichi at that point. For, you know, it's like, what's he going to do? But like swapping the fish with the sword is crazy. Like he almost copied Samura's ability.
Yeah. No, I mean, first, you know, to what you just said in regards to with the Enten, I'll destroy the Shinichi. That's a big proclamation, but we know he's primed to do it. So I'm excited.
That's like when rookies get drafted and on their draft night, like when they after they get drafted, get interviewed, they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna win a Super Bowl this year." And you're like, y'all were 4-12, or you know. Whatever.
That's hilarious. No, man, that's pretty accurate. But we know he can do it, man. We literally know that. Like I said earlier, everything is in place.
He's capable, and he does use the black fish to swap with the sword, which is, you know, usually we see the blackfish more times than not in terms of, you know, like the just seeing a fish like out like doing its own thing or whatever, or like him just using a fish. You know, we'll never see the red fish or like Nishiki's like the cloak, but the blackfish is always the one roaming around, and we see him like. What do you make of him swapping that with a sword? Do you think it's just like him being able to swap the spirit energy properties of the fish and the sword because they're technically the same, and he's just getting that from Samura? Like maybe Crow's ability isn't necessarily to swap places; it's more just the ability to spread the feathers. So- and you know, maybe, and he just used that as like the base for, you know, being able to do what he's doing here, is like just recalling his spirit energy or the Enten spirit energy.
So my personal theory, because obviously we don't know, and I don't think we have enough, or I have like, I cannot pick up on enough to have a clear direction of what this is besides what I think it is, which is that I think this is him beginning to tap into the true realm, which was something that I was under the impression previously, because the true realm has been talked about so much, and it's also been so ambiguous where like, oh, the theoretical limitations are like, they go as far as the user. And so like, it's always been this open-ended thing of like, you don't really know what it looks like. And so originally, I remember way back when like him and Sojo kind of talked in that separate space, my personal theory was that two enchanted blade wielders that have tapped into the true realm, that's what it looks like, right? But I think we get a lot of that afterwards to know like, oh no, he hasn't really tapped into that yet. And considering that we also see like the water kind of, if you look at that cold ass panel, the last one, you see the water kind of circling the blade, as well as that like the water drops seem to be like surrounding Chihiro.
Mm-hmm.
And we see like the true realm referenced in the page before it in that conversation with Chihiro. I literally think that's what's bleeding over. It's him tapping into the true realm, and because essentially, like I said, those limitations are dictated by himself. We know that, and this might be like the stretch, right? What I'm about to say now, that one of Enten's abilities is Aka, right? And I'm not saying this is Aka, but it could be that same line of thinking where like Chihiro saw what Samura was doing with Crow, and through the true realm, he can replicate it. Like I said, not necessarily through Aka. Maybe it has to or doesn't have to do with Aka, but I do see that. Like that's what I am under the impression it is. It's like the true realm, and through that, because there's no literal limitation that we know of, he's able to just go there, right, and kind of replicate that. And like I said, maybe it has something to do with Aka, maybe it doesn't. But I think it's the true realm. That's what I'll stand on. I think he's tapping into that.
Yeah, and I think that's a safe bet. I do agree with you, because like even because he says in the like page before, he says to face the past and connect it to the future. Perhaps that was the purpose Rakuhira infused into Enten. It almost feels as if that Enten's ability is to basically bridge the gap between like these like distant figures who are like renowned masters of the sword and heroes, that using their like basically just making that connection to like being able to face these like giants of history. It's Enten's able to lend itself to make a connection to Chihiro and them, which like is the true realm basically, that allows him to replicate what he sees or how he engages with them. But that really does it for the chapter, right? And before we go, just want to hop into like quick like a theory section. Basically my theory for like what I want to talk about, and I'd like to get your theory, because I do think this fight ends in a chapter or two. I think Chihiro is going to just break Tobimune and free Samura of the contract. He's not, and that's going to be Samura and Iori maybe leaving, getting like away from the story, like freeing him of that internal contract, and like saying now like you're not connected to this anymore. Like the internal contract's gone. And maybe him and Iori are able to get through him at that point, now that Tobimune is broke. Because he wouldn't be, it's not like he can stop the Swordmaster without Tobimune anyway. Or anybody, like he was ready to almost, like, he tells Yura, like he was thinking Yura was going to kill him if he doesn't say yes. When, before, like when he was just, a normal dude, essentially. I mean, he's still a dog, don't get me wrong. We've seen him take out the Tatseki warriors. But I could see this, because Samura is too strong to be an ally to Chihiro, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, it makes the story almost too easy in a sense. Not saying that there could also be complications, or maybe he does join Chihiro and then Yura pops up and sneaks him. We don't know. But I do get the feeling that maybe Enten is going to just break Tobimune in this fight and free Samura of he's gonna tell him now, like, you have no reason to harbor this bloodlust anymore. Like, I took it away from you. And now like Chihiro has Enten, he's without Tobimune. So like kind of roles reversed.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I hadn't really thought of that. It would be a nice kind of a callback to how he left, like he broke the contract, like he broke Chihiro's contract, a couple of chapters back, and now it would be Chihiro doing the same thing but permanently. I'll be honest, I hadn't really thought of that at all. Another thing that we do find out this chapter is like this idea of Chihiro and Enten essentially guiding the enchanted blades down the right path. So I do wonder if you're saying, if that's one of Chihiro's options, is literally like, okay, if he doesn't listen, I guess I'll go for Tobimune. I'll be honest, the reason I've only, thought about this right now, right? But initial reactions or immediate reactions, the only reason I don't think I see that happening is because we know how hard, or how much it took him for him to break Cloud Gouger, which, like we discussed earlier, was wielded by Sojo. I think it would be, obviously Chihiro's grown a lot since then, so that might not really be an efficient argument, but ultimately I think it's going to be really hard for him to break Tobimune. And not only that, let's say it does happen, I could and I'm being devious with this because I would actually really enjoy seeing something like this, like us getting baited to seeing something like that right before Samura's taken out by Yura or something. I still think Samura will die. Like I will die on that hill. This is a sword bearer's assassination arc, and to me it wouldn't make sense that Uraha comes back, Samura is able to just walk off to the sunset, or like walk off in the sunset, under the sunset, whatever, and like the arc ends and
well, they wouldn't be sword bearers.
Well,
no
yeah,
more.
but like still the sword bearer's assassination, like no, I mean, okay, yeah, good point, right? But I personally, it's not what I. Yeah. To me, it would be like a huge fake out, because it's like what you're saying is a huge technicality. It's like, well, they're technically not sword bearers, right? But they were, right? And so yeah, like I because I was also like rereading this whole arc. Yura, one of his lines is, he literally let me just pull this up really quick. Yeah, so Samura, right before they attack Kamunabi HQ, he says, "We must wield Samura wisely and then sacrifice him for the greatest possible gain. That's his fate." Dude, and Yura has not missed a single step throughout all of Kagurabachi. Like, even giving up the Shinichi was part of his plan. Like, everything has literally gone in his favor. I have no reason to think that, it's not gonna happen now. Right, like I'm betting on the safe bet, like I'm sticking with Yura, and if he says, like Samura's fate is sealed and he's gonna die, like I'm banking on Yura.
It's crazy. Yura is the safe bet, but you're right though. Like he's never been stressed or like really pressed about anything.
Yeah, and I think that line is seriously gonna come full circle, and I can really see it. Like, look at Chihiro, he just convinced Samura, and then here comes Yura. Because I think their pinky promise is also broken after the Hishaku went at Samura. Like, we haven't really gotten back to that, but I know there is a throwaway line where Kaguri's like, well, Samura's not on our side anymore. So it could be like, all bets aren't, like everything goes now. And yeah, man, I just don't see a scenario where Samura just gets to like walk off. I think I said this last episode and I'll emphasize it again. I think he's going down like as a tragic hero after bearing his guilt for so long. Just when it looks like he sees the way forward, I think he's gonna get that stripped away from him. And I think it's only gonna make the story better, and it's gonna also spark something in Yori, which upon a reread has now become among the more likable characters for me personally. So yeah.
That could, if that does happen, as you say, which, I wouldn't, have an issue with it. That could also be like Samura's punishment for siding with the Hishaku. Uraha stayed true. Uraha stayed who he was, like a good guy. Not saying Samura's necessarily like a bad guy, but he is an antagonist now, and Uraha never switched up. That, that's why, that could be almost essentially why we get two swordsmen with their own stories running at the same time. That's why Uraha comes back and Samura maybe doesn't come back, and Samura does die a tragic hero. the one thing I want to bring up before we wrap this up is we do earlier in the fight, like when Chihiro does that like Kaguri, the slash he did on Kaguri in the classroom on Samura though. We see Samura then swap places with another feather. Chihiro loads up a Kuro. Now we know Chihiro's not trying to kill Samura here. Kuro, that's a big slash to be sending at that distance. I feel like that's him, like he was almost maybe trying to take out, he's trying to use Kuro to take out Tobimune. Like I think like that's just what it feels like. But that could just be like a little throwaway thing that, just like a choreography thing that shows Samura's speed of teleporting behind him again. That could be nothing, but
one thing I will say to your credit, because even if I don't think his first step would be to just go straight to destroy Tobimune, because of how hard it is, he would have to start kind of breaking it down. Even if it's a plan B, you would think that he would have to like start chipping away at it since the start if he is to fall back on that as a plan B and then say like, fuck it, I'll break it. He can't just wait till like the fight's halfway to then be like, okay, I guess I'll try to break it now. So you could be onto something.
Right, like, when,
now,
by the way, it's crazy Samura's doing all this in chanclas, but we fucking see Samura's like hand shaking and he said, what just happened? He's like questioning, like, what was that just now? That is like, that might be the first tick away of Tobimune's like, health, like as a sword.
Yeah, that could be a couple of things. I read that and, it could be that. It could be him feeling that Enten is different because right before that we get, the piece of information that Enten was made with a just entirely different intention compared to the blades. And so I wonder if it's like he's feeling not just the intention of the blade itself because it's so different from the other blades, but also maybe, or if not that, just Chihiro tapping into the true realm. Because again, we also see like that goldfish before we see him touch his hand, we see him, we see it swimming towards him, right as we also see Enten next to Samura. So it could be a couple of things, and it could be a combination of all those things.
We'll have to let Hokazono cook.
Yeah, that's the mantra, huh?
But I think that'll do it for us. Any closing thoughts or statements, Mr. Dice?
No, I guess I said no, but yeah, one thing real quick, I do want to officially apologize to the Masumi after, rereading this arc. I know we've kind of been shitting on them a bit, but I think it's mainly because we've wanted to see more of them. They've been so hyped, especially after we saw them, that it just made us feel like, yo, wait, what? Like, it feels like these guys haven't done as much as like they've been hyped up to be. But after rereading the arc, man, like those guys are clutch, and I'm not just bringing them up to apologize because we found out all those chapters ago that they are essentially the perfect, guys to counter Samura's ability.
Where they at,
wonder
though?
If we're at,
if they the perfect counters, where they at though?
Come on,
like, that's what...
well, that's what I'm about to say. I do wonder if this fight reaches a point where like Chihiro starts to realize like, oh fuck, okay, this guy's too much for me even now. I do wonder if that line is going to come full circle and like the Masumi, because I don't know if they're still protecting Yori or whatever the fuck is going on, but I do wonder if they're going to pull up. And I would love for them to pull up, honestly, because it would be the perfect time to not just bring that line of them being the perfect counter Samura force, but like bring also the line of them being like the ultimate scholars and like mastering the fundamentals of sorcery and like everything that the Kamunabi respects. Like, it would be perfect to see all of that come full circle and see Chihiro backed up by them to take on Samura, because there I can see a very viable way where Chihiro can win without any bullshit shenanigans, true realm, plot armor, MC, like it's like a very clear path to victory. I believe if the Masumi are around, and yeah, it just, to me, it brings the whole arc full circle. So
I'm
I'd
down
love to
for
see
more
them.
Sumi. Yeah, just
Oh
let
yeah.
her pull up in her motorcycle. I'll hop on the back and we ride off into the sunset.
I guess only she can pull up, right? Like fuck
Ro and
Ro, fuck what is it,
Moku, yeah,
Moku?
like don't get me wrong, and I give them shit, but like it's kind of like the Shiba thing, right? Like I'm not saying they're bad characters. It's just funny that they get all this hype, but we don't never see them. Like at least the Masumi have done things on panel that were like,
Yeah.
you know, and not saying Shiba hasn't either, but considering how much they've been hyped up, considering what they've done, it doesn't
Exactly.
match. But you know, like, I mean, shit, maybe Kaguri faked everyone out, and Kaguri circled back to, you know, beat up Ro and Moku and take the sword back. You know, they still have the other enchanted sword with them.
Yeah.
But I doubt that.
The sheath. Remember the
Oh, yeah,
sheath?
the sheath. That's Kaguri's just waiting down there holding the sheath. But nah, yeah,
We'll see,
I like the Masumi too. I think they're a nice a nice addition, excuse me, to the story. But other than that, I mean, that'll do it for us. Make sure you make sure you like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Put your theories down below in the comment section, how you think this fight's going to end and how many more chapters you think this fight has to go.
Yeah, we still haven't gotten around to, highlighting some of the comments and theories. You know, we talked about it, but we'll be doing that. Just, wanted to give the viewers some reassurance. Like, we haven't forgot about that.
Yeah, the break week's been a bit rough.
Doing that.
This break week felt way longer than just, a week. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But I guess it's because of where the last chapter left off. And I mean, this one was a nice, compliment to that last chapter.
I hope Hokazono stays healthy, man. That's the last thing I'll say.
Oh, yeah, that's the most important
Because he's young,
thing.
man. He's young, and if this story's going to be long, and if he's to have a lengthy career, man, we know how that work culture is over there. So I'm just honestly wishing him the best of health, like genuinely, because that dude is younger than me. So younger than both of us, right? So, wishing him the best of health, honestly, genuinely.
Facts, that's most important. The dude's a human being. He shouldn't have to die for his art,
Yeah, man.
But that'll do it for us. Until next time. Peace.
Peace.